start our program. I'm very excited to introduce you to our guest today. For those of you who don't know, my name is Terry Gilman. I'm the founder of Ladies Lunch and Literacy. And for the last 13 years, I've been introducing the South Bay and Los Angeles audiences to debut authors. And we get to do that again today. So I'm very excited about that. Just a comment before we start. I do want to mention that we are, as everybody is fully aware, in extraordinary times. And in particular, this is an extraordinary time for indie bookstores and indie businesses. And on behalf of Creating Conversations, our bookstore and our event business, and Ladies Lunch and Literacy that brings you these programs, I do want to thank you for your support. It means a lot. I do also want to mention that you can continue to support us through purchases at our bookstore, our physical bookstore, which is open every day from 1 to 5, or through our website, creatingconversations.org. We have a full service bookstore, and we have booksellers ready to help you, and we would be honored if you would continue to support us through this time until our event business comes back and beyond. Ladies Lunch and Literacy has always partnered with a nonprofit literacy organization in our community. We do that for 2 reasons. We want to introduce you to what's happening in our community, and we also hope that you will also be interested in donating to a nonprofit literacy organization of interest to you, either monetarily or through volunteering. Today's event represents the last event for Ladies Lunch and Literacy for 2020, and therefore the last time that we will have the opportunity to hear from Wise Readers to Leaders, who is our nonprofit partner this year. I want to introduce you to Andrea Sonnenberg, who's the founder and CEO of Wise Readers to Leaders, and she's going to say a couple words about her organization. Andrea?
Thank you, Terry. So once again, it's an honor and a privilege to be affiliated with this amazing organization that promotes reading and literacy, which is something that's near and dear to my heart. My organization is basically a literacy enrichment program for kids from underserved communities, and our STAR program is our summer program, which is a kind of a literacy camp, and it's 6 weeks and it's free for kids from underserved communities. And we do a state-of-the-art literacy curriculum in the morning, and then we do afternoon enrichment day camp kind of activities in the afternoon. And then in light of COVID, because of the devastating impacts on education for our young people, particularly those that are of color and are disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, we are now carrying our services on throughout the year and offering supplementary literacy programming and enrichment programming to students online. So the thing that I would love to just emphasize to you is that how critical it is in light of COVID, the impact that is being experienced by students from underserved communities. And studies are now showing, a Stanford study just came out showing that as much as 183 days of learning in reading that students are going to be behind, and over 200 days in math. So it's a really, really critical time for our students that are already disadvantaged because of their color or their zip code or their family situation. So the work that we're doing now is more important than ever. It's always important to enhance the literacy skills of kids from underserved communities, but now even more so, because these kids are so disadvantaged by being online all day with programs that are not engaging and are not directly geared towards the individual student. Our classes, we're online now as well, but our classes are really small. Our class sizes are really small. We have like a really high student parent teacher to student ratio. And the really cool thing, and I'll just leave you with this, is that our teachers and our assistant teachers are college students and high school students. So we have this incredible near peer sort of relationship where they're mentors and role models, and they're really able to look to these kids, their teachers, and look to them as aspirational and things that they want to be able to achieve in their life. And they're also mentors and are there for them to try to help them in a way that a teacher might not be able to. So we again thank you so much for the support that Ladies Lunch and Literacy has given us, the wonderful books that people have donated in support of us, and donations that have been made. So we thank you for thinking about us, and if you have any interest in supporting us, um, we welcome your involvement. So thank you.
Okay, now I'm very excited for our panel of guests today. We have three industry experts, two industry experts, and one amazing writer. I am going to introduce you to Shannon Grant, who is my Simon & Schuster sales rep and a friend. And we have had so much fun over the years just talking about new books, especially debut authors and books that we love. Shannon has been in the bookselling, in the publishing business for over 25 years. She spent 18 years at Books Inc., both as a children's book buyer, as well as overseeing event programming and their book fair department. She also has worked at other bookstores. Um, uh, when we when we started talking about introductions for everyone, I said, well, this book takes place in a bar. What's your favorite drink? So I want to introduce Shannon, whose favorite drink is a spicy margarita, which she begins drinking at 5 o'clock on the dot. And when she is done doing Zoom education with her kids. So I want to with no more talking on my part, Shannon, please take it away.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you for having us at Ladies Lunch and Literacy. I'm so excited. As Terry mentioned, I am the Simon & Schuster sales rep for Southern California and also Arizona. So it's my job to represent all of Simon & Schuster's books to independent bookstores. So I get the opportunity to present them to people like Terry. One of my favorite parts of the job is often curating that list because we publish a lot. And so getting to know those stores and their likes and their dislikes and, kind of culling that down so we can focus on what's really going to work for them. So I'm thrilled. One of my favorite parts of the job is to discover a debut and then to get that debut into stores. And I know that Terry and I had this great email exchange late one night as we were both reading Ordinary Hazards, Anna's debut. I know that's something that we have in common, getting these out into the world. I know these events are special. I've been lucky enough to attend one in person, so very excited to be here virtually. I do hope that soon we can all be together raising a glass of wine, but to toast our authors. But I'm thrilled to have the privilege to introduce Anna and Lindsay today. So I'm going to go ahead and get them started. Anna Bruno, writer and teacher at the University of Iowa's Tippie College of Business. Previously, Anna managed public relations and marketing for technology and financial services companies in Silicon Valley. She holds an MFA in fiction from the Iowa's Writers Workshop, an MBA from Cornell University, and a BA from Stanford University. Ordinary Hazards is her first novel, born 2 weeks after her son was born, released into the world after her second son was born. Cycling is big in Iowa. She loves dogs. Her dog Addie is featured in the novel. Her drink of choice is an old fashioned when the kids are in bed. We also have Lindsay Sagnette, Vice President and Editorial Director of Atria Books. She has been in publishing for over 20 years, working for a variety of New York publishers. Over her career, she has edited and acquired a distinguished and eclectic list of authors, including Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, A Constellation of Vital Phenomena and Other Works. Almost Forgot About You by Terry McMillan, Oprah Book Club pick Ruby by Cynthia Bond, and many more. In her first year at Atria, she's acquired new books by New York Times bestselling author Lisa Jewell, Rebecca Stroll's unforgettable love story in 5 years, and Anna Bruno's literary debut, Ordinary Hazards, her first acquisition at Atria. Her current challenges include Zoom school for her 4 and 8-year-olds, and her drink of choice is also an old-fashioned when the kids are in bed at 9 p.m. So virtual applause to Anna and Lindsay, and I'm going to turn it over to you to chat.
All right, can you all hear me? I've unmuted myself, so just like, I guess, wave your hands at me if you can't hear me. Okay, great. Thank you so much for having Anna and myself and welcoming us into your conversation. I am thrilled to talk to you about this dazzling new novel and this dazzling literary voice, which just took my breath away when I first read it. Ordinary Hazards is a book you enter and inhabit, and it's narrated with a voice you cannot shake. Sentence by precise sentence, I was riveted as Anna excavates and celebrates the joy and the heartbreak of life. The events of Ordinary Hazards take place over the course of one evening as Emma, the main character, appears hell-bent on some serious self-destruction. You don't know exactly what has brought her so low, but as the night spills out before us, scenes from her past are recalled and they show us exactly what she's lost and exactly what she might be looking for. It's no surprise that early reviewers compared Anna's work to that of Richard Russo and Jane Smiley. I could go on and on about what struck me about this powerful and merciful book, but it's always more fun to hear the author speak. So I'm going to turn to Anna now with my first question. Anna, hello. I hope I made you blush a little bit. I could have said more. I bought your book in fall of 2018, but its story couldn't be more relevant to the here and now. A person is facing down tragedy, trying to put one foot in front of the other. The main character has suffered, and we open with her sitting in a local bar, having a drink alone on what we later learn is her birthday. You tell her story in the close third person. The tone is hushed. And when I read it, I felt like I was hovering over Emma's shoulder as you narrated the story to me. It's a masterpiece. Emma truly transforms over the course of this novel. For good or for ill, you do not learn until the very last page, but she transforms. So thank you for this book. And please tell me if you can remember when you first knew you wanted to be a writer.
Thank you, Lindsay. I am blushing. That's a wonderful introduction and amazing to hear those words from you about this book, because I feel so lucky to have you as my editor. And as I'm expressing gratitude, thank you so much to Terry for hosting. It's amazing, even on Zoom, just to see faces of readers, because I haven't, really gotten to do that because I've been, stuck in the house, as we all have. And I also just want to express gratitude for people's time investing in this book and these characters, because I know, it's one thing to ask someone to purchase your book. It's another thing to spend, a whole night up reading it, as many people have said they've done. And I don't know, I'm just filled with gratitude for that. But anyway, I will get to your question. Wanting to be a writer came a little bit later in life for me than I think many writers. I wasn't, sitting in my 5th grade classroom, like aspiring to be a novelist. I kind of had an idea of what my professional life would be in the corporate world. I went to, as Shannon said in my introduction, I lived out in Silicon Valley working for firms out there, and I got my MBA at Cornell. And I think I expected that to be my life in business. But I always had an interest in writing, and it was always there nagging at me, sort of, as a question, could I do it as a hobby? And I think the answer is, to do something, to do it well and fully, doing it as a hobby is wouldn't quite get me where I want it to be. So in 2013, I uprooted my life in San Francisco and moved to Iowa for the Iowa Writers Workshop to do it, to really do it, to go for it. And it took, and as you can see, as everyone knows, I mean, we're in 2020 now, so that was 7 years ago. It took quite a long time, but the end result was this novel, Ordinary Hazards. Or no, it's not even an end result because I'm working on another novel now. But it was ultimately the best decision of my life. I mean, it's so amazing to put these characters into the world. It's just, I'm so grateful for that opportunity, and it feels authentic. It feels like what I should be doing, and I guess I've never felt that way about any other job, any other occupation I've ever had. So I don't know. Thank you for the opportunity to do it.
But you've had these other career paths, but yet you didn't feel like you had like a vocational pull to them. Yet when you made this crazy brave decision after all this time invested in this other more like a business path, corporate path, to turn right and go to Iowa and begin this creative piece of your life, it felt right immediately. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think the amazing part is that even when I was failing, like even when like there was a prior novel that didn't get sold, it's so hard initially with the finding the agent, and even when things weren't going my way, it still felt right. It still
Uh,
felt like I was doing what I was meant to be doing, and exploring the characters that I was meant to explore. So it's not. I mean, it is amazing to publish, but I think even pre-publication, there were rewards, for following that dream. Um, and I guess that's a very unique experience to fail at something and still feel like you're doing what you need to be doing.
well, that must be when you know it's right, right? I mean, it's got to be because it's at first I was thinking when you were speaking, oh, is it confidence? But it's not necessarily because the best writers, it's not confidence because I feel like when the ego is that strong, it's not when you get the best writing. And when you read your book, you can tell this is a person writing from like an intense desire to connect with her characters and from this very humane place.
Yeah.
While you were at Iowa, there obviously Iowa is the legendary MFA program in the country. It's the Harvard of writing schools. They have some of the most mythically amazing teachers. What was there something you heard there that was sort of grounding writerly advice for you, or would you say that your best writing advice has come from outside of that program?
The advice I got in the program, one of my professors was Ethan Kanan. I don't know if anyone on this Zoom has ever met or has ever read Ethan Kanan, but he's a brilliant writer, and his characters stay with you. And the question of why that is, I think he answered in his own advice to his students, which was this. He said that to fully understand and explore a character's point of view is really all about scene selection. So in his mind, point of view wasn't, kind of just the voice or what the character, says or observes. It's more like what does the writer choose to show in scene? And that is what creates the point of view of the character. And I think that was so valuable to this novel because Emma, who's narrating the novel, she's making choices to tell certain parts of her story. She's sitting at the bar and she's talking about she's talking about her whole past. I mean, even back to her childhood. And so then the question for the writer and actually for the editor too, I mean, I should put this back to you, Lindsay, is so what of her whole past is she going to show in one single novel? And that really creates the point of view of the character, and it really kind of, the humanity of the novel exists in those scenes. So every scene, and for people who have read it, there's a heavy emphasis on scenes between Emma and Lucas, her ex-husband, and every scene between them was there for a purpose.
Right.
And that's I think it's the challenge of writing and writing well, and also the reward of it is seeing those intimate scenes that have been, hopefully so carefully selected for the reader.
It's so interesting because you would think, oh, if I'm going to keep this book down to literally this one person, one night, one major tragedy that she's sort of revisiting, you would think it would almost narrow a writer's choices. Oh, it's so easy. And that you have the whole person's life and what to choose, and not just which scenes from her past to choose to inform what's happening in her future, but then when they should be revealed to the reader in a way that's ultimately is projecting like wisdom, but also not manipulative. Like most readers read a lot. They don't want to you don't want to feel manipulated either. And I thought you did such a beautiful job of building that book. And it's a book that when I read it, I thought, oh my God, of course she's a business person. Like, I mean, normal writers, the structure, like it was on a different level to me. And I loved it. There were all these echoes in the book, like the fact that you have Emma teaching her students in business school about the art of storytelling and how they should, while we are reading her own story and she's narrating her story, like that's a very rich reading experience, I think, when you're reading through a book like that, or that's how I found it to be. And I just wanted to just applause for that. I thought that was amazing. And I don't know if, I guess the question it's leading me to is like, when you first thought of this book, like sort of what came first to you? Was it like Emma at the bar? Was it a scene with Emma and Lucas? Was it Addie? Like, how did the book, like, what was the first thing you saw when the book came to you?
The first thing I saw was Emma at the bar. I really did start with that from day one. I wanted to explore a woman in a public place like a bar that when if you encountered her in life, you wouldn't know her story.
Right.
And so I kind of wanted to let the reader be a fly on the wall for her story. So that's where I started, and it gave me this very, as you said, it's very much a structured novel. I mean, it gave me that structure of hour by hour at the bar, but then also this amazing leeway to explore every aspect of her past that mattered, because you're in her head and you can see whatever she wants you to see. So, like my favorite scene in the novel it's actually a very simple scene where Emma is unloading the dishwasher when Lucas has done the dishes, and every other dish that she unloads is dirty. There's like coffee crusted on the bottom of the mug and egg webbed in the fork. And, and they have this funny exchange about it that to me is an exchange that I might have with my husband, because he's not great at loading the dishwasher. But to me, those are the scenes that create they're the love story, right? That's love in a relationship to me, like unloading a dishwasher and complaining about it, I guess. And the structure of the book allowed for that, because even though we're in the bar for this very discreet night, we have Emma's mind to explore, the things that matter to her, in her, as I said before, in her point of view. And in her point of view, that's what she recollects. And memory, and as you talk about echoes, I was thinking about, one of the echoes of the novel is this idea of memory and what we remember and how we remember it, and the accuracy of our memory. And that's what ultimately ends up making a life, is all of these memories. And then the question is how we relive them, live with them, and then move on from them. So yeah, it's all sort of in there. Yeah.
Right. It's sort of like, right, if we look at the book as telling us sort of what makes up a life, and it highlights that, right, because you're distilling it down to Emma and her point of view. It also highlights, for me, or something I was noticing, and I think we all read books in a personal way, but like how one thing, a moment so tiny, can literally change the course of your life forever. And I do feel like you get into that so powerfully. Like there's this one part of the book where they have this really cool old wooden house, if you haven't read it, and Lucas, her husband, is a carpenter, contractor-ish guy who kind of works for his dad, and he's both capable and beautiful, but also kind of like not that on it. and there's this hole in the floor, and it's just like there are these tiny things, and you love a book when you continue to see these things. Like, I'll go into homes now, and if I see a hole like that, like that's around one of the pipes and it's a little too big, all I can think of is Emma in her life and how this one tiny moment, affected her family. Um, and one thing Anna and I talked about is not wanting to give obviously the book away, but in this book, the main character is trying to get past a tragedy, and you don't know where she's going to end up at the end of the book. And so part of the tension is because you do have this main character trapped. She's literally in a bar, on a bar stool the whole evening, hour by hour. It was like, how do you bring tension into a book like that? So did you know when you were starting out, like, I've got to find a way to like move the book along? Like, how did you come up with your brilliant way of structuring this book?
I mean, narrative tension, I think, is one of the hardest things in literary fiction, because you want
So
to explore these characters, and yet you're right, it has to move along. The present tense story, which takes place in the bar, and readers don't even notice tense when they're reading, which is really interesting to me, because as a writer, tense is so important. And the fact that the story in the bar takes place in the present tense, and the story when Emma's telling her history is in past tense, as a writer, like, that jumps off the page to me. But readers, like, every reader I talk to was like, doesn't even notice, which I
totally.
guess is great.
Yeah. It's
Um, but yeah, so the present tense story in the bar, there is an element of snowballing action. One of my favorite books is A Simple Plan by Scott Smith. I don't know if anyone's read that. It's an amazing book, and actually it's quite literary in some sense, because although it's a thriller, like, the characters are really good.
great.
Um, but the thing I've always loved about that book is the way the plot truly snowballs. I mean, one action, they find a bag of money, leads to the next, and all of a sudden it's like this murderous spectacle. Obviously, Ordinary Hazards does not do that, but I wanted sort of that same feeling in the bar, where things slowly unspool. The characters are, of course, they're in there all night drinking more, but the tension, which is very subtle,
Mhm.
between them, because they all have these histories that you're getting to know, um, is gonna, slowly mount into some event. And certain things were intentional. Like, I wanted Emma to have an active role in that. At one point, Emma does something that's kind of very kind of wrong and deceitful in the bar, and I won't give it away what exactly she does, but she's playing a part in this tension too. She has agency in what's going on in the present, and then the challenge with writing, which again, I hope it's so fluid that the reader doesn't quite even notice it, but is the puzzle pieces that come together in the end, where Emma is learning about her past and telling her past, and then as things unravel in the bar, and some of the characters finally tell her other details that she didn't even know had happened in the past. So that was literally, like, that was the puzzle of the book, and in revision, kind of piecing those scenes together. So the reader is finding out information, and Emma's finding out information, and Emma's telling the story, but things are happening in the bar that are beyond Emma's control. Like, that all sort of has to come together, and I think that's the satisfying part of a novel. And it was that is also the hard work of revision.
That's, to me, when you seemed like a magician, because you're with Emma the whole time. So even though it's not a first person story, it's close third. So you feel like it's basically first person. And then towards the end of the book, when there are these other revelations that surprise Emma and surprise us, I'm like, how can she be surprised? Like, it was just, I don't know. That was, to me, one of the more magical parts of the book, that she could be surprised too, because you feel like the story is in her control, that she is doling out what she wants you to know, when and how, to build sort of her narrative, almost to justify whatever decision she's going to make. And then new information comes in. And
But I think that's the beauty of this idea of, so at sort of a meta level, when you don't know people's stories, so you see them in public, you might see them in a bar, you don't know, and then if you did know those details, we would have so much empathy for each other. If you knew Emma, like a lot of people, at first Emma rubs people the wrong way, and I get that. I mean, she's a product of privilege. She's quite judgmental, but man, I mean, once you get to know her, it's hard not to feel something, and I think that's I think I mean I'm not trying to be heavy-handed or push themes in this book, but I think that that's something that literature teaches us, that if you actually know these stories and you get these details that are revealed and often are never revealed. Sometimes we would never hear the details of people's stories, and that's sort of the origin of true empathy, I think. And one of the things I wanted to do justice to was also not just Emma, but the other characters in the bar. Martin Yagla being the main sort of antagonist. He has a story too, and there are reasons why he is the way he is, and that is also revealed over the course of the book.
Right. He is the most initially easy to sort of dismiss as like put him in the box. Oh, he's that guy. I'm glad you brought him up because I wanted to ask you, in your writing, which character sort of surprised you the most, either in how they changed during the book in a way that you hadn't expected, or by emerging as sort of a more important figure or having a more important role than you thought they were going to have?
The character that surprised me was Martin Yagla, because he is written as such a character that I think people would initially recognize and write off as, oh, that guy, that problematic guy. But there's a scene in the novel where he's in the bathroom with Emma and they're having a moment, and she finally finds out why he's so broken, or one of the reasons he's so broken. And that scene came as a surprise to me when I was writing it. Martin acts very badly in the novel, and then the fact that he tells Emma sort of where he's coming from, I think is a key point. It's a key turning point for her to understand him. So he's the one that surprised me the most, because I ended up feeling empathy for him, which I didn't feel when I was initially writing his character.
No, and in that moment that you're mentioning, it's funny because it's not like you go, "Oh, I forgive him for everything," or "Oh, we've had it all wrong this whole time." He's still who he is, but with this new piece of information, it's just like what you're saying. It just increases or it basically is the start of our ability to get him a little bit, right? Like, I
Yeah,
guess
and even
version of
right,
empathy.
and even in that moment, the reader, and also Emma, don't know the guilt he feels over Emma's own tragedy. So all Jimmy is another character, and Martin, I mean, they're implicated as well. And that, I hope that in the end, the reader feels what maybe they're feeling, which is this horrible sense of, what has happened and what their roles were in it. And so, yeah, so that you in that scene, you're starting to learn about him as a character, but you don't even fully know what he's done until later, and the true depth of his guilt.
Did you always have the book set there? Like, is there a reason it wasn't set in Iowa? So the book is set in, because I didn't say that, it's set in upstate New York, sort of, but not, Anna doesn't name the town. And you know that Anna has chosen this character, Emma, to be from sort of a high-end Connecticut background. And yet she has decided by meeting Lucas, she wants to be with this guy, Lucas, who is the handsome, works with his hands guy. And she's going to teach upstate, live with Lucas, and make a life. And her father has very firm, her father is the businessman who was always all over the world working and not really that in tune with his daughter, divorced her mother. And yet some of the conversations between Emma and her father just have the most powerful sentences in the book. Like, he's trying to guide her and he lays down this stuff, and she either is just like him or she's reacting against him. But everything she does is sort of in line with him, either as a negative or a positive. Did you know that? Tell me a little bit more about that. I loved their dynamic. He's not on the page very much, her father, but when he is, he like completely looms and
Yeah,
informs.
he's a very important presence. And at one point, Lucas said to her, I married your father, because
Right.
she is him. She is her father in a lot of ways. She can't escape that. Upstate taking place in New York was important, because the proximity to New York City as a financial hub, and Connecticut, where Emma's father is comes from a background of real estate private equity, so very much like super wealthy, high finance, and you kind of need to be in that region,
Mhm.
Connecticut, New York, for that world. And Emma escapes. She's always escaping the trappings of her life, and she escapes upstate at one point. But she can never. She is a deeply ambitious woman, and a product of she's her father's daughter, and so there is always this pull towards finance in particular and money, but also just a pull, I think, towards her father. I mean, her father is a gravitational force for her, and she loves him. I mean, I hope readers know that as much as she's constantly criticizing him, but she also loves him deeply. She's, and you see that in brief moments, like she mentions being a child, and looking through his briefcase, and
Right.
while he's on a business call, and kind of, so there is, and I think that that's something that all everyone has parents, and we're all in their orbit in some way, and um we push back on them and we become them, and we have ambition and we try to escape our ambition, and so there's all these questions that are kind of rolling around, and ultimately I think that you know one of Emma's best assets is her ambition. Like, I don't think we want her to escape that. I certainly didn't. And the fact that her life becomes tragic, you know, is not because of her ambition. It's just
But yet there is a character who thinks that it is, which is so interesting. And actually, when you and I were working on the book, it didn't feel as relevant as it, does right now in some ways. I have to say, like, the questions about women's rights and things that are happening right now, you know, very much relate to this book, and that you have a young mother who has a baby who wants to go back to work because she has a husband who's not bringing in money, and everyone has opinions about that in this book. And so that it's just a different, because you do also, we probably won't even have time to get to it, but like you do talk a lot about class and how that informs their marriage, like, and yeah, I mean, because I think that's what's so interesting is that you always sense that Emma is like her father, but never more so than when she's a mother,
right.
and that she can't be her father as a woman as easily as her father could be himself. And you feel that in her. She still feels it, even though she's still pulled more to the ambition. She doesn't escape the pain of people's perceptions of that, and also her own just loss of not being able to be two people at one time.
Right.
And you, as a young mother, writer, woman, wife, like, and me, so I think we both really related to that part of the book. It's, yeah, I felt like the book just gets right to the heart of so many issues and questions that are elemental to a woman's life.
Yeah, and I know we're running out of time, but I want to know too, like, after reading hundreds of books when you joined Atria, why Ordinary Hazards? I mean, you could have picked anything.
I know, I mean, I think I would say, like how you say a book comes to you, right? The muse has to speak to you. It's sort of like that for the editors too. It's like the main character. There's just, we read all these books. I can say, oh my gosh, I admire this one so much, or oh, I love this one, but it's not for me, and all these things, until you get to the book where the main character kind of refuses to be ignored. And I think Emma refused to be ignored. And I had more questions. Like, I can tell that I want a book when because I send everything to my Kindle because I have children who don't sleep, and I end up reading in the dark while they're asleep. I read on the Kindle. but I know I love something when I print it out and I already start editing it, and I'm like, oh, I'm done for, you know. And then I get desperate, and then I like start thinking, how do I get this book? Um, and that's, I just knew because those things were happening. Like I was reading the book and going, wait, why would she have done that? Actually, she should, like, when I start having questions, it means I care. And so I knew I cared so much. And I just cared too much to let anyone else be her person. I just wanted to be her person, you know?
Yeah.
I feel very sort of parental toward the characters in the books, and I get obsessed with them. And so I think I was just obsessed with Emma, and was just so hoping you would say yes. So thank you.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Well, I have other questions, but oh, what did I want to ask you? Oh, I wanted to ask you about the end, because I did, when I bought the book, it had a very different ending. And I know you and I talked a lot about it. And I feel like editors were always like, we want like the rose garden. And like the writers are like, we want reality. And it's always like a push pull between the two of us. And I feel like we definitely duked it out. And the author always wins because your name is on the cover and not mine. But did you feel happy with how the book ended without revealing how it ends? Did you feel when you were like, I'm finished, like it was the right thing?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Working with you as an editor was amazing because, I mean, first of all, normally in life, I'm pushing back on everyone who's giving me like, well, my colleagues at the university. Like, I definitely like, I'm always like fighting for my perspective. But then with you is like every suggestion you made, I was like, yes, I want to do that. Like, I want to make this book better, and I totally agree. It's like a miracle. To find an editor that sees your characters so fully and so well. But with the ending, the sort of the irony of it is, like the ending I had initially written was very much like unfinished in a way, like very ambiguous. You don't know what's going to happen to Emma. But in my mind, I think I had finished her story. Like in my mind, it was a happy ending. But that wasn't on the page because I guess I wanted to leave that ambiguity for the reader. But then working with you, it became, and it's not perfectly tied up in a bow, of course, but it became it became the happy ending, I think, that was in my head all along, that I imagined for Emma, but I hadn't allowed myself to write. And then finally, through the editorial process, I think you pushed me to write that ending for her. And I'm so glad. And like readers, like all love the ending. You know, like they're all like, every reader is like, I've never, it must be like, no one's ever said like, oh, I read this whole book and then I hated the ending.
Oh, people, oh my God, Gone Girl, everyone hated the ending. Are you kidding me?
No, but for Ordinary Hazards, no
Oh,
one.
yes. Oh, yeah, no, because I was gonna say it happens. It happens. So
Yeah, no, readers talk about, that's the you know, readers might say of Ordinary Hazards that it took them a while to get into it or something like that. They might criticize the beginning, but never the ending, which is, I think, you know, you find that so
when
much.
her dad gives her that wedding present, and you're just, I won't say what it is, and her dad gives her the wedding present, and she's like, you don't know me. And then in the end, she's like, thanks. You know, it's like, you're just like, oh my God. And yet she doesn't feel cheapened by it. It's just, you're just so happy, you know, even though you're right, it's not perfect. So bravo.
Yeah.
Bravo.
Thank you for pushing me towards that ending.
I think this is a great segue for questions from our audience, if anyone has any questions. I want to thank the two of you because I think you gave us some great insight into how an author and editor work together. It was great. No questions from the audience. Okay, I've got one. So it's really actually for Lindsay, well, both of you. So this is one of the most gorgeous covers for any book I've ever seen. Now, I'm not really sure that it looks like a book that takes place in a bar.
You were correct.
And so I'd like both of you to actually talk about this amazing book cover.
Well, I'll go first since they gave me a range of options of things to see at first. And the first stuff they showed me was so bleak. And I was like, oh no. And um, the bird is a key figure in the book. And I mean, she really counts. Like there's a real symbology there. And I thought if there was a way to represent that on the cover and yet still had some tension. And so the designer had showed this to me but I didn't realize how the colorization would work, that it was like this ombre and I just I always loved the title of the book so much. So I remember telling them that whatever they could do to highlight the title, I thought would be very important because to me, it was one of those classic titles that just sounds like, it just like, you're like, how has no one used that title yet? To me, and I've got a very classic feel. And I just loved how with a lot of literary novels, everything's very beautiful and serifed and small, like the title and the author's name. And I loved how, because Anna to me is this bold writer, her character demands attention. And I love this font on this, sort of fragile object that's done with a line drawing. And I think this was the first jacket I sent to you, Anna. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it was the only jacket you sent to me. Yeah, I mean, like there is a scene in the book where there's a bird in the bar, but I think that covers. That's interesting that some other versions you saw were kind of very dark, because I guess you want sort of an atmospheric kind of. You want to feel something from the cover. It's interesting too. There have been a lot of books with birds on them this season.
This is what always happens too. Like a year ago, everyone makes the same decision, and then a year later, when no one can, then everyone has bird books.
Yeah.
And a year from now, it's all going to be fire trucks or something. But when you make the decision, you think, oh, I'm going to be the first one with my amazing bird cover, and then everyone has the bird cover the same month, and you're like, are you serious? But it's so funny. I think it's parallel hive mentality. Like either we were all looking at birds at the same time and then all the editors asked for birds. I don't know. But it does happen like that a lot with covers. I'm sure that Shannon and Terry know more about that than anybody because they're on the other side trying to sell them. And they're like, every book has boots this year or whatever.
There are definite themes that go across the lines, but I wouldn't change a thing about this cover. I think it's gorgeous. And while we're going on questions, you guys are the perfect author editor team. I'm so glad you found each other. I feel like you're magic together. But to Anna, I kind of want to know, we know what drew Lindsay to your writing, but what made you want to work with Lindsay as your editor? Because this is your baby shepherding it out into the world.
Yeah, it was crazy when my agent set up a call with Lindsay when she wanted to buy the book. It was exactly 2 weeks after the birth of my first son. I was completely delirious, just sleep deprived. I was probably incoherent on that phone call. I have no idea what I said. But I guess, I don't know, it's hard to explain in one phone call how you can how you get a feel for the editor and the way she sees your characters and your work. And it more than anything specific that I remember that Lindsay said on that call, because I don't remember anything from that period of my life. I remember just the feeling that she was the one, like meeting someone and being like, oh, that's the one. She just, everything she said to me on that call, I knew I wanted to work with her. I knew she got it. I knew she understood the book in a way that I wanted it to be understood. And, not every call with editors feels that way. And it's not like, someone else told me I want to change this thing that I didn't want to change. It wasn't that literal. It was more just yeah, Lindsay got it. She got the character. She understood Emma. And that I took away that feeling from that call in a very crazy time in my life.
I remember you told me you had a 2-week-old and I had like an 18-month-old and had just taken this like new job with like 10 people reporting to me. We were both probably delirious. And my son didn't sleep. We were both probably just like, yeah, like we could both, and we just had like a high, yeah, it was a great connection. And I think, right, there's a real element of trust. And it's almost like you can hear in the tone of the other person's voice that they get you, that they are also not going to railroad you. Because you're right, it's not literal. Like, I'm sure I said things that we ultimately didn't end up doing in the book, and you said things that we didn't have, but it's more just like you can kind of hear who you want to talk to when you talk about this thing that's yours, but that also is my responsibility to then, it's like it's trust. It's a trust relationship. It's very special.
Uh, we actually have a couple questions. So Brooke, do you want to unmute yourself and ask?
I loved reading your book, and I'm so thrilled to be able to, hear the behind the scenes type things. And my question is, how do you write what motivates you to write during this time? Because it's getting the words on the page when we have all this going on in the world, sometimes seems impossible.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hear what your strategies are.
Yeah, I am not as strategic as I would like to be. Like a lot of writers like are very they set aside their writing time, and I am protective of writing time. Like when my 2-year-old goes, my mother-in-law watches my 2-year-old, and I do not use any of that time to like go to the grocery store or do any of the millions of chores that I could be doing. So I think that's I'm not a structured person, and I'm not a morning person, so I sleep until the last possible minute when I can. But I do think that as writers we have to be protective of writing time, and what that means is even if it's not at a certain time of day or particularly with a particular structure to it, as long as I have a finite amount of time, and I'm not going to allow anyone to call me, to bug me over email, or and I'm not going to allow certainly not going to allow chores to seep into that time. I think it's just a matter of having that kind of protectiveness about it. Because it's hard to defend that time. I mean, it's not like a job where you can just tell your spouse like, I have to be at work, sorry, you got to watch the kids, I got to be at work. Writing is different, and so it takes kind of just a force of will to make sure that time is yours. So that's really all I do. I wish I was a morning person. Like you hear these writers say they could wake up at 5 a.m. before the kids are up and write. I definitely can't do that.
We have time for one last question, and it's from Molly.
Hi there. I wanted to find out, how difficult is it for you to write about the less likable aspects of Emma's character? Because, most of the time we want to try and make the protagonist somebody that people admire or like or root for, like the incident with Yag.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Thank you, Molly. I think for me, I always liked Emma, and I know that readers sometimes bristle against her, but to me, I think because I knew her story intimately, and I kind of knew as I was writing her why she was the way she was, I empathized with her. And I allowed her to behave badly, I think out of a place of understanding, I guess. Like, there's a scene in the book where she's driving her car, and actually Lindsay pushed back on this a little bit because she's kind of mean about it, but there's this Subaru Outback in front of her with a sticker on it, with the 13.1 sticker on it, and she's like, in her head she's criticizing this woman for putting a sticker on her car because she only finished half a marathon. And she's like, how could anyone celebrate that. They've only finished half a marathon. And, that's Emma being mean. I mean, she's being totally judgmental and nasty. But to me, like, that scene was in a place where Emma is leaving her divorce attorney's office, and she's in extreme pain. And so for her to be nasty, it seemed appropriate. And I guess that's the joy of writing a character that you understand and that you hope that readers will come to maybe not ever like. Like, I think it's okay if you never like Emma, but I hope that you see her as fully human and feel for her, or your heart aches for her a little bit, because as much as she does behave badly, it's all from a place, I think, that it's from a very human place.
Thank you. I just feel like there's so much more discussion we can have about this wonderful book, and I am so happy to have shared this discussion and Ordinary Hazards with this group. And I first want to thank the three of you, Shannon, Lindsay, Anna, for joining us today for Ladies Lunch and Literacy. It was wonderful. It was a great discussion. It certainly added to my understanding and love for this book. So thank you for that.